came to our last part of our topic, that is parasympathomimetic agents, and that last part is the indirectly acting cholinergic drugs. Since we have studied in detail about the directly acting cholinergic agents, that means directly acting agents are the agents that will directly act on the cholinergic receptors. It might be nicotinic or else it might be muscarinic receptors. Whereas what happens exactly here in indirectly acting agents means, suppose this is your cholinergic neuron releasing acetylcholine, and this acetylcholine will interact the receptors which are present in the neuroreceptor junction. Okay, over here will be sitting an enzyme that will cause hydrolysis of this acetylcholine, and the name of this enzyme is acetylcholine esterases. Okay, so what indirectly acting agents will do? Indirectly acting cholinergic drugs will inhibit this enzyme. Okay, so indirectly acting agents will inhibit this enzyme. So what happens when this enzyme, this choline esterase enzyme, is inhibited? In turn, it will increase the availability of acetylcholine in this synapse. Okay, so because of this reason the cholinergic activity will be increased. So this is the mechanism of action of indirectly acting agents. So these indirectly acting agents, or you can say the anticholine esterases, are the agents which will inhibit the acetylcholine esterase, protect acetylcholine from hydrolysis, and thereby produces cholinergic effects. Additionally, there are few indirectly acting agents which have got some effect or some kind of actions which occur directly on the cholinergic receptors also. Okay, so it is a brief introduction regarding the indirectly acting cholinergic drugs. Next, we'll see about the classification. Yes, we have got two classes of indirectly acting drugs. First class comes under, for it is for those drugs that will reversibly inhibit this enzyme. So we call them as reversible inhibitors. Okay, so first class is reversible inhibitors. Okay, obviously acetylcholine esterase inhibitors. So first class is reversible inhibitors and second class is irreversible inhibitors. So the name only says everything. Reversible inhibitors means these are the drugs coming under this class, they are able to engage this enzyme for a small period of time. After some times this enzyme will get rid of these drugs and it will start producing its previous activity, which was nothing but hydrolysis of acetylcholine. Whereas in case of irreversible inhibitor, it will inhibit the enzyme for its lifetime, and the action of acetylcholine esterase to reoccur, we require other enzymes to produce, new enzymes to be produced. Okay, in case of reversible inhibitor, the actions of these drugs will be inhibited before new drugs are being produced, but over here we can regain the activity of acetylcholine esterase unless and until new enzymes are being synthesized. So this is the basic difference between reversible and irreversible inhibitors. Reversible inhibitors will inhibit these enzymes for a small period of time, maybe from few minutes to few hours. But in case of reversible inhibitors, these enzymes will be inhibited throughout their life, and for inhibiting this enzyme, this acetylcholine, some new enzyme should be synthesized so that acetylcholine of this acetylcholine can be inhibited. Okay, now quickly coming to the drugs coming under this class. First of all, we'll see about reversible inhibitor and then we'll discuss in detail about regarding the irreversible inhibitors. So examples of reversible inhibitors are physostigmine, neostigmine, pyridostigmine, next we have got edrophonium, we have got tacrine, next rivastigmine, donepezil, and lastly galantamine. Okay, so these all are example of reversible inhibitors. Means these agents are inhibit the enzyme acetylcholinesterase for some period of time. Among this, physostigmine, tacrine, rivastigmine, donepezil and galantamine, these agents, these drugs are kind of tertiary amines. And neostigmine, pyridostigmine and edrophonium, these are quaternary amines. Now what's the difference between tertiary amines and quaternary amines? Means it have got a very huge role, tertiary amines and quaternary amines. Tertiary amines means these are the agents such as it contains like this. Okay, means there won't be any charges present, but here in case of quaternary amines, 4 groups plus there will be a charge on the nitrogen atom. Okay, on the nitrogen atom when there are charges we call them as a quaternary amine, and this one is your tertiary amines. Now what is the difference or what is the importance of this is charged and this is uncharged? So recall your topic of absorption. Any drug which need to cross the biological membrane, it should be highly lipophilic in nature. And what makes the any drug highly lipophilic? Yes, it should be in unionized form. So unionized form of a drug is said to be more lipophilic. Okay, and this charged one, it is less lipophilic. So these agents are more lipophilic, whereas quaternary amines are less lipophilic. Okay, when any agent is more lipophilic, it can easily cross the biological membrane, and less lipophilic means it is unable to cross the biological membrane. Now the most important biological membrane we need to discuss over here is your blood brain barrier. Okay, so the tertiary amines such as physostigmine, tacrine, rivastigmine, donepezil and galantamine, it can easily cross the blood brain barrier, and after crossing the blood brain barrier, it can inhibit the acetylcholinesterase enzymes present inside the brain, and it will increase the cholinergic activity inside the brain. Whereas in case of quaternary amines such as neostigmine, pyridostigmine and edrophonium, these are less lipophilic in nature, therefore they cannot cross the blood brain barrier. So for these agents we can find the cholinergic action in the periphery. Okay, so these three drugs, that is neostigmine, pyridostigmine and edrophonium, their cholinergic activity can be seen in the periphery but not in the central nervous system. But the agents which are tertiary amines, which are more lipophilic in nature and therefore can easily cross the blood brain barrier, we can see their cholinergic activity in the central nervous system. Moreover, whatever drugs you can find on the left side, that is your physostigmine, neostigmine, pyridostigmine and edrophonium, all these agents have got a role in the treatment of a disease known as myasthenia gravis. Myasthenia gravis. It is a kind of autoimmune disorder. So all these agents have got a role in the treatment of myasthenia gravis. And the drugs whatever I have written on the right side, that is your tacrine, rivastigmine, donepezil and galantamine, these agents are said to be cerebroselective anticholinesterase drug. Okay, these are cerebroselective anticholinesterase. See, inside our brain there is an area. Now why they are known as cerebroselective anticholinesterase means, so basically inside our brain there is an area known as, suppose this is our brain, and inside our brain there is an area, the name of that area is basal nucleus of Maynard. Now what this basal nucleus of Maynard contains means there are lots and lots of cholinergic neurons, and basically the cholinergic neurons present in this basal nucleus of Maynard is mainly responsible for memory. Okay. Now what happens when there is destruction of the cholinergic neurons in the basal nucleus of the Maynard? It leads to a situation known as dementia. And these loss of cholinergic neurons leading to dementia, it mainly occurs in old age people. So you can say it is a kind of senile dementia. And where can you find senile dementia? Yes, senile dementia is a symptoms that takes place in Alzheimer's disease. So Alzheimer's disease mainly occurs because so the reason for of Alzheimer's disease is it also mainly occurs because of damage or loss of cholinergic neurons in the basal nucleus of Maynard. Now how can we inhibit this destruction of these cholinergic neurons? Means here also we can give some anticholinesterase drug, the drugs which inhibit the enzyme anticholinesterase, so that the availability or the life of this acetylcholine is increased. So for this reason we are giving these drugs, all these drugs, tractrin, rivastigmine, donepezil and galantamine. Since these drugs can easily cause the blood-brain barrier that can move inside the brain, and they will inhibit the further loss of these cholinergic neurons inside your basal nucleus of Maynard. So therefore these agents can be used in the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. Now you will be thinking, why not physostigmine? Even physostigmine is lipophilic in nature, so why not physostigmine can be used for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease? Yes, it can be used for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease, but along with producing central action, it can produce more peripheral action as well. Like when you are giving any person physostigmine for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease, no doubt the cholinergic neuron loss will be reduced, but on the contrary he will be start producing other cholinergic symptoms such as lacrimation, salivation, sweating, reduced heart rate and muscle twitching. There will be tremors, palpitation. So all these symptoms are also produced because of physostigmine. So therefore these agents, tractrin, rivastigmine, donepezil and galantamine, are widely used as a nootropic agent for the for some symptomatic relief for the patient suffering from Alzheimer's disease. Therefore these agents are also known as cerebroselective anticholinesterase drugs. Next we'll see about physostigmine now first. Alright, so we'll start with physostigmine. It is a kind of indirectly acting cholinergic drug that mainly act by inhibiting acetylcholinesterase enzyme. Okay, and these are a kind of tertiary amines because of which they can easily cross the blood-brain barrier and can produce central toxic effect or central cholinergic activity, you can say. So these physostigmines, these are often used in the treatment of glaucoma. Okay, so these are mainly used along with your pilocarpine. Okay, so a combination of pilocarpine and physostigmine are often used for the treatment of glaucoma. Apart from this, these drugs are also used in the treatment of whenever any toxic dose of atropine is given. Toxic dose of atropine. So to reverse the actions of atropine, we can give physostigmine. See, as I have told you previously, atropine is a kind of muscarinic receptor blocker. So whatever actions are about to produce by acetylcholine, it occurs when it interacts with the muscarinic receptor. But what atropine does? Atropine will block those receptors so that acetylcholine cannot come and interact with the receptors. Suppose this is your cholinergic neuron and this is your neurotransmitter effector junction. Here is your muscarinic receptor. As such, acetylcholine should come and interact with this muscarinic receptor to produce action. But what this atropine will do, it will block this receptor. When this receptor has been blocked, the acetylcholine is unable to come and interact with the muscarinic receptor. Plus, in addition to that, there will be again a hungry person, that is your acetylcholine esterase, that will come and it will cleave or hydrolyze this acetylcholine. So what physostigmine will do? Physostigmine will block this receptor. When this receptor is blocked, the acetylcholine is available at a higher amount, and this acetylcholine can replace this atropine and it can interact with the muscarinic receptor. So for atropine toxicity, in case of atropine toxicity, we can use physostigmine. And physostigmine are also used when any drug is having anticholinergic action. Like very simple example as your tricyclic antidepressant. Okay, when I am saying it is an antidepressant, means these agents are used for the treatment of depression. But along with that, these agents have got certain anticholinergic activity. So to inhibit that anticholinergic activity, we can give tricyclic antidepressant along with your drug physostigmine. So these are few areas where these physostigmine can be used. And previously, physostigmine was being used in the treatment of myasthenia gravis. But now this drug is no more used for the treatment of myasthenia gravis, and the very very obvious reason behind not using physostigmine for the treatment of myasthenia gravis is because it is highly lipophilic in nature and it can easily cross the blood-brain barrier, leading to production of central side effects such as convulsions and paralysis. Okay, so previously it was used in the treatment of myasthenia gravis. What happens in myasthenia gravis, we'll see in a minute. So first of all, we'll brief our learning regarding physostigmine. So physostigmine is an indirectly acting drug which mainly act by inhibiting acetylcholine esterase enzyme, and it is a kind of, we'll see that what exactly happens in a myasthenia gravis. Myasthenia gravis. It is a problem of your skeletal muscle. Suppose this is your motor neuron, that is your cholinergic neuron, which will be releasing your neurotransmitter, that is acetylcholine. Alright, and suppose this is your skeletal muscle, and what receptor is present on the skeletal muscle to receive the acetylcholine? Yes, we have got over here the channel which is your NM receptor. So normally what happens, acetylcholine comes, it will interact with the NM receptor, which causes opening of this channel. There will be influx of sodium ion leading to depolarization followed by repolarization. That means action potential will be produced. This is a normal condition. But what happens in an myasthenia gravis means some autoantibodies will be produced towards this NM receptor. It is a kind of autoimmune disorder because of which some antibodies will be produced against this NM receptor. And what happens, this antibody will believe this ion channel is a kind of antigen, and it will interact with this ion channel, and internalization of this complex takes place, so that the ion channel, the receptor present on the skeletal muscle will be few in number. Okay, like it was 1 2 3 4 5, instead of 5, just 2 ion channel or 2 NM receptor will be available on the skeletal muscle end plate, available for receiving the acetylcholine. So there will be much loss of NM receptor. So what happens when there is reduced number of or reduced availability of NM receptor? So this acetylcholine, whatever will be there, they will be standing in queue. Okay, they will be standing in queue that when my turn will come and when I should interact with the receptor. Since only few receptors are available, so they will be standing in line that they are waiting for their turn. But when they are waiting for their turn, what will happen? Yes, again our same hungry man, that is your acetylcholine esterase will be there, and whatever acetylcholine were there waiting in queue, in line, waiting for their turn to interact with the receptor, instead they will be hydrolyzed or eaten up by this acetylcholine esterase enzyme. So very few acetylcholine will be available, or you can say there won't be any depolarization. So there will be muscle weakness in case of myasthenia gravis. So this is what happens in myasthenia gravis. So what is a myasthenia gravis? Myasthenia gravis is an autoimmune disorder because of which an auto antibody is produced against the NM receptor. When these antibodies interacts with the NM receptor, internalization of the receptor takes place, so that on the surface of the skeletal muscle only few receptors are available for receiving acetylcholine, and because of this the availability of acetylcholine will be more in the synapse and the number of receptor will be less. So it will, this acetylcholine esterase enzyme will take an advantage, and it will hydrolyze the entire acetylcholine present over here. Okay, so now how can we treat this situation? How can we inhibit the symptoms of this myasthenia gravis? Means we can give some anticholine esterase drugs, like previously initial drugs which was suggested for the treatment of myasthenia gravis was physostigmine. So what this physostigmine does, it will interact with this acetylcholine esterase enzyme. Okay, so what happens by interacting, it will engage this acetylcholine esterase enzyme, so that whatever acetylcholine is there, they will interact with whatever number of receptor is there. Like 2 receptor are available, so they will interact with the just 2 receptor, and it will produce the depolarization. It will start producing the action potential. So we can treat myasthenia gravis with the help of an indirectly acting cholinergic drug, or you can say the anticholine esterase drugs. Okay, so initially physostigmine was being used for the treatment of myasthenia gravis, but nowadays physostigmine is no more used for the treatment of myasthenia gravis. You know what is the reason behind that? Because physostigmine have got lipophilicity. It can easily cross the blood-brain barrier, and it will start producing central side effects such as convulsions and paralysis. Okay, so initially it was suggested that physostigmine can be used for reducing the symptoms of myasthenia gravis, but now myasthenia gravis is not used. So instead of myasthenia gravis, we can make use of other agents which are having less lipophilicity, like your neostigmine and pyridostigmine and edrophonium. So these agents can be used for the treatment of myasthenia gravis. Okay, now we'll see at what level these agents can inhibit the enzyme. Okay, first of all, we know physostigmine. I'll draw a diagram of your enzyme, and then you will get to know. Suppose this is enzyme number 1. Okay, this is your acetylcholine esterase enzyme. Okay, so the agents such as your physostigmine, neostigmine. So suppose this is your acetylcholine esterase enzyme. So we'll see how different agents and different anticholinesterase drugs will interact. We'll take a simple example of edrophonium. Now this edrophonium, it will form a very weak hydrogen bond with these enzyme, very weak hydrogen bonding. So they are able to engage this enzyme for nearly 10 to 20 minutes, and after 10 to 20 minutes this acetylcholine esterase enzyme will get rid of edrophonium. Okay, so edrophonium will make a very weak hydrogen bonding with this acetylcholine esterase enzyme. Next, when we see the action of physostigmine, neostigmine and pyridostigmine, how they will engage this enzyme means, this is your enzyme, that is acetylcholine esterase, and how the drugs such as physostigmine, neostigmine and pyridostigmine will work means these agents will form a covalent bond with the with the enzyme. But this covalent bond is a kind of very labile covalent bond. Labile covalent bond means these covalent bonds can be broken down and this enzyme will again start functioning normally, like its function was to produce hydrolysis of acetylcholine for small period of time, which might be from few minutes to few hours. Like these agent can able to engage these enzyme for nearly 30 minutes to around, you can say, 3 to 4 hours. Okay, from 30 minutes to 4 hours. So these drugs are able to engage the enzyme acetylcholine esterase for about 30 minutes to 4 hours, and the reason behind that is it forms a very labile covalent bond, means they are able to block or they are able to inhibit the enzyme by forming a covalent bond. But since this covalent bond is a very labile covalent bond, labile means they can be broken down after some period of time. So this is how these agents will be acting or inhibiting the enzyme. Next, if we compare these reversible inhibitors with irreversible inhibitors, means suppose this is again your enzyme, and suppose we compare it with any irreversible inhibitor. So these irreversible inhibitor will form a very strong covalent bond with it. Okay, a very strong covalent bond, and it is so strong that this enzyme is unable to get rid of this drug, this irreversible inhibitor. So for lifetime of the enzyme, this enzyme will be inhibited when it interact with the irreversible inhibitor. Okay, now there initially, but when initially this irreversible inhibitor interact with the enzyme, initially they can be inhibited with the help of a drug known as oximes. See, initially, what happens, there will be an alkyl group present on the irreversible inhibitor, and once this alkyl group is been removed out, this enzyme will be inhibited for the lifetime, and such an inhibited enzyme is known as aging. Okay, aging means when alkyl group from this irreversible inhibitor is been removed off, and after removal of this alkyl group, this enzyme will be inhibited for the lifetime, is known as aging. And suppose aging has not yet occurred, means before the removal of this alkyl group, if we give that person oximes, the inhibition of this enzyme can be inhibited. See, these irreversible inhibitors are very, very dangerous. These are mainly present in your pesticides, your homicides, even in your nerve gases. So what will happen when these enzymes are being inhibited permanently, means permanently this enzyme, not in the entire body, obviously new enzymes will be produced, but once these enzymes are being inhibited irreversibly, what might be the situation, there will be continuous sweating, there will be continuous salivation and lacrimation, the heart rate will be reduced, the blood pressure will be reduced, even there will be salivation, there will be lacrimation, there will be defecation, the bronchoconstriction will be there, too much bronchial secretion will be reduced, breathlessness may be occurring, occurring there, and there will be abdominal cramps because of GIT, motility is increased, the peristalsis will be increased, even your gastric acid secretion will be increased. What happens to your skeletal muscle? Continuous depolarization will be leading to paralysis kind of condition. So many problems occurs when these enzymes are being inhibited irreversibly. So if any person by chance or because of any person wants to attempt a suicide, if he consumes any kind of homicides that contains an irreversible inhibitors, if we want to protect that person, we should give oximes. So what is oximes will do? Oximes will inhibit these irreversible inhibitor, but oximes can work only and only before this alkyl group is been removed from the inhibitor. Once this alkyl group is removed, then these enzyme can be irreversibly inhibited. Nothing can save this enzyme from getting inhibited. That is known as aging. Alright, so we were discussing about myasthenia gravis, and as I told you before, physostigmine was being widely used for the treatment of myasthenia gravis, but now physostigmine is no more used because it have got lipophilicity, and because of which it can easily cross the blood-brain barrier and start producing central side effects. So nowadays instead of physostigmine we are using neostigmine. And the importance or the advantage of using neostigmine is it is not lipophilic in nature, therefore these drugs cannot cross this blood-brain barrier and there won't be any central side effects, and whatever action we assume is being produced by neostigmine. Therefore physostigmine is no more used nowadays. Instead of physostigmine, neostigmine is being used. So even these agents are able to inhibit the enzyme for nearly 30 minutes to 4 hours, and in that meantime the symptoms of myasthenia gravis will be reduced. We have got one more drug, that is your pyridostigmine. So even pyridostigmine has got same action, that is it is producing a labile covalent bond, that means it is reversibly inhibiting the enzyme acetylcholine esterase, but as we are increasing, we have got increasing advantage as well. So pyridostigmine have got a longer half-life as compared to neostigmine. See, once you learn about physostigmine, and ultimately you can know about all these drugs. Physostigmine is a kind of reversible acetylcholine esterase inhibitor, but it is lipophilic in nature. Neostigmine is also a reversible inhibitor of the enzyme acetylcholine esterase, but these are not lipophilic. Pyridostigmine is also a kind of acetylcholine esterase inhibitor. These are also not lipophilic in nature, plus it is having a longer half-life. Okay, so if you remember one, and you will catch the entire chain. Next we have got one more drug, which is edrophonium. So what might be the role of edrophonium? It can engage the enzyme just for 10 to 20 minutes. So can it be used for the treatment of your myasthenia gravis? Yes? No, edrophonium is not used for the treatment of myasthenia gravis. Rather, this can be used for the diagnosis of myasthenia gravis. Diagnosis of myasthenia gravis. See, basically what all are the symptoms of myasthenia gravis? There is no acetylcholine approaching to the NM receptor, because of which there won't be any action potential, and therefore there will be muscle weakness. Muscle weakness. So muscle weakness is basically the symptoms of myasthenia gravis. But muscle weakness also occurs because when there is large amount of acetylcholine produced. Okay, because whenever there is an over treatment with anticholinesterase enzyme will also produce same muscle weakness. Okay, so muscle weakness can occur because of any reason. Muscle weakness may occur because of myasthenia gravis. Muscle weakness can occur because of over treatment with anticholinesterase enzyme. So how can we distinguish that this muscle weakness is a kind of because of the problem of myasthenia gravis or not? So for diagnosis we can use edrophonium. you know what we'll do, we'll give an injection, we will inject the edrophonium nearly 2 mg IV, and we will see the action. The action of this edrophonium may last just for 10 to 20 minutes, means it is able to inhibit the enzyme just for 10 to 20 minutes. And if there is some kind of improvement, if there is some kind of improvement, that implies that person is suffering from myasthenia gravis. But instead there is some kind of worsening, that means it is because of over treatment of your acetylcholinesterase drugs, anticholinesterase drugs. See, why there is improvement. Suppose any person is suffering from myasthenia gravis and we inject edrophonium, so what will happen? Yes, when we are injecting edrophonium, it is able to engage the enzyme for 10 to 20 minutes, and for that 10 to 20 minutes acetylcholine is available for these receptor, and there will be production of action potential. So there will be a relief for 10 to 20 minutes. So improvement occurs. That means it is diagnosed for myasthenia gravis. But you know, when there is an over treatment of this anticholinesterase drugs, what happens? Suppose this is your motor nerve and releasing acetylcholine, and this is your skeletal muscle with your NM receptor. Acetylcholine coming and binding continuously, it is coming and binding. And you know what happens, as I have told you previously also, this NM receptor requires an optimum supply of acetylcholine. If the supply is less, there will be muscle weakening that occurs in your myasthenia gravis. And even if the availability of acetylcholine is more, again it will lead to muscle weakness, because continuous depolarization may lead to inactivation or paralysis of this skeletal muscle. So what happens when any person who is giving when there is over treatment of anticholinesterase drugs, whatever acetylcholine is there, we have already inhibited these enzymes. So these enzymes are available in very less amount, and again if we are giving edrophonium, means whatever enzyme, residual enzyme are available, they are also getting inhibited, and there will be a large supply of acetylcholine, and there will be continuous activation of this receptor. And continuous activation or continuous depolarization may lead to inactivation. So there will be a worsening condition. So when worsening condition occurs, that means the muscle weakness was because of over treatment of anticholinesterases. Okay, so this is how edrophonium can be used for the diagnosis of myasthenia gravis. See, myasthenia gravis and over treatment of anticholinesterase drugs have got same symptoms. In both the cases there will be muscle weakness, but the reason behind the muscle weakness is different. Here muscle weakness is because of reduced availability of receptor and thereby reduced availability of acetylcholine. Over here the muscle weakness is because of over availability of your acetylcholine. Okay, so reason are different but symptoms are same, so we can differentiate the symptoms with the help of edrophonium. So now we'll see about the irreversible inhibitors. Irreversible inhibitors. Okay, so quickly looking to the examples, we have diflose, ecothiophyte, parathion, malathion, tabun, sarin, soman. Next we have got carbaryl and propoxur. Okay, so these are the examples of irreversible inhibitors. Among these, we have got carbamates. These are carbamates and these are organophosphates. Okay, so we have got some chemical structure of carbamates and phosphates. Carbamates goes like this. R2 and R3. This is carbamates. And here is your organophosphates. This is organophosphates. Okay, now why I am showing this structure of this carbamates and organophosphates means you should know that how these enzymes will interacting with these irreversible inhibitors. We'll see about reversible inhibitors, chemical interaction as well, and you will have a complete idea. The most important idea which I want to give you, like how aging happens, like how this alkyl group has been removed and how this aging happens and how these enzymes can inhibit the aging. Well, so now we'll see the structure of the enzyme acetylcholine esterase, and next we'll see that how this acetylcholine esterase is inhibiting the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, and next we'll see that how these reversible and irreversible drugs are inhibiting the enzyme. So first of all, we'll see the structure of the enzyme. This enzyme basically contains two important sites. One site is anionic site and the another site is not cationic but esteratic site. Okay, so two sites, anionic site and esteratic site. Anionic site is present near to the amino acid tryptophan, and esteratic site is made up of three important amino acids, that is serine, glutamate and histidine. Okay, so this is the structure of your enzyme acetylcholine esterase. Now we'll see how acetylcholine is getting hydrolyzed by this enzyme. Okay, so here I am making your neurotransmitter acetylcholine esterase. CH2, CH2O, C double bond O, CH3. Okay, so this is acetylcholine compound. Now basically what happens, this nitrogen group of the choline molecule is been attracted by this anionic site, and after attraction it will be fixed over here. Okay, see someone like this. This is your anionic site and this is your esteratic site. So this anionic site will be attracting the nitrogen atom and it will be fixed over here, and this one will be free. And free as such, this serine molecule will produce a nucleophilic attack on this molecule. Okay. And here there will be a nucleophilic attack by the serine molecule. And the structure will become like this, CH3O minus. Okay, and this nucleophilic attack which is done by your serine molecule, this activation of the serine molecule is mainly done by your histidine. Okay, so what happens in this step, the nitrogen molecule is been attracted by the anionic site, so this nitrogen atom will be fixed over here. Okay, these are been trapped. The acetylcholine molecule is being trapped by the enzyme, and once they are been trapped, they will be fixed in place. They are being chained over here, and next this serine molecule will produce a nucleophilic attack on this carbon atom, and it will remove it. It will cleave it off. Okay, to become an acetylated enzyme. This is acetylated enzyme and this is your choline. Okay, this is choline and this is your acetylated enzyme. Later on, this acetylated enzyme in presence of water, it will leave this acetate molecule also and it will regain the normal structure. Okay, so basically this enzyme is cleaving off and then coming back to its normal condition. Okay, it is throwing this acetate molecule. Astratic site, anionic site, and this is your choline and this is your acetate. Okay, so this is how acetylcholine molecule will be hydrolyzing the acetylcholine. Okay, so basically we'll have a simple example with the help of this pen. Suppose this pen is your acetylcholine. Okay, I'm just for example, suppose this molecule, this pen is your acetylcholine, this is anionic site and this is your asteretic site. So what this anionic site will be doing, it is, it is somewhat attracting the choline, the nitrogen atom of the choline. It is not holding the choline, it is just attracting so that it should be fixed in place, and next that asteretic site will be cleaving off, it will be removing out. Okay, see, we need to separate choline and we need to from acetate. So from a single hand I cannot do it, isn't it? We need to fix one end and next we can detach the another end and we will throw both them. Okay, so choline and acetate are being separated. So this is how this enzyme will be acting. Anionic site will be fixing by attracting the nitrogen molecule, and what this astratic site will be doing, it will be producing a nucleophilic attack and it is detaching the acetate group from the choline, and afterwards it will be throwing back the acetate and these are back in its position. Okay, the anionic site and the astratic site back in its normal condition. So this is how acetyl choline esterases are producing hydrolysis of your acetylcholine. Okay, now we'll see next how these reversible and irreversible agents are inhibiting the enzyme. Okay, first of all we'll see about the reversible agent. First of all we'll see about the carbamates. So the structure of carbamate is somewhat like this. As I have shown you, carbamates are like this: R1 O, C double bond O, N, R2 and R3. Okay, this is your carbamates, such as your physostigmine, neostigmine, pyridostigmine, even your adrophonium. Okay, this is the enzyme with anionic site and astratic site. Okay, so when carbamates come in contact over here, again there will be a nucleophilic attack of serine molecule on the carbamates, and the structure will be somewhat like this. And the carbamates will be like this. Over here, C, N, R2 and R3. Okay, and this R1 will be interacting over here with the anionic site. Okay, so these carbamates are holding the enzyme in this condition for some period of time, and later on it will be removed out. Okay, so this interaction, this labile covalent bond will be inhibited after some time, and this enzyme will be coming back to its normal condition. So it is coming back to its normal condition. R3 and OH. So these are the activities produced by your reversible inhibitors like your physostigmine, neostigmine and pyridostigmine. These are able to produce labile covalent bonds. They are able to engage the enzyme for some period of time, and then after some times it is coming back to its normal condition. See, this interaction is a bit slow reaction. This reaction is slow reaction. Whereas when we saw regarding this acetylcholine, this interaction was very rapid. Okay, so very rapidly acetylcholine is getting cleaved off. But regarding the carbamates, they are able to engage this enzyme for nearly 30 minutes to few hours, and after some times they are getting removed, and acetylcholine esterase molecule will be back to its normal condition. So this is how this reversible anticholine esterase inhibitors are producing an action. Apart from this, one more important thing that you need to know about here is regarding the edrophonium. See, edrophonium is able to inhibit the enzyme for nearly 10 to 20 minutes. That means these enzymes are interacting only with the anionic site. Okay, for 10 to 20 minutes they are interacting with the anionic site, and then they are leaving the enzyme. So in this manner, this edrophonium is producing the cholinergic activity for 10 to 20 minutes. Whereas in case of other agents such as physostigmine, neostigmine and pyridostigmine, they are interacting with this esteratic site, and they are able to inhibit the enzyme for 30 minutes to almost 4 hours, and thereby again inhibiting means removing off, means they are reversibly inhibiting the enzyme. They are inhibiting the enzyme for a small duration of time, and then this enzyme is coming back to its normal condition. Next we'll see about the irreversible inhibitors like your organophosphates. First of all, the structure of your organophosphates, it goes somewhat like this. Phosphate means obviously there should be a phosphate group, R1, R2O and R3. This is your organophosphates, and then we'll see how these are interacting with the enzyme. So this is our enzyme, acetylcholine esterase, anionic site, esteratic site with its amino acids serine, glutamate and histidine. Okay, now when this phosphate molecule comes over here and it interact with this serine molecule, obviously the phosphate group will be interacting like this. So R2 and this R3 with the OH group of the anionic site. Okay, so this is the interaction, and once it has interacted over here after some times, there will be removal of the alkyl group. This R2 group will be removed after some times. Anionic site, esteratic site, serine, glutamate and histidine. And see, once this phosphate group has been attached to this enzyme, after some times, what will happen? There will be OH. This R2 group will be removed off. Once this R2 group is been removed from this phosphate group, it means aging has been occurred. Aging means this enzyme has been inhibited for lifetime. Okay, so how can we inhibit aging? Aging can be inhibited by the help of a drug known as oximes, like your paroxysms. So paroxysms can work before aging occurs, means before the removal of this R2 group we should provide oximes. So the structure of oxime is somewhat like this. Okay, this is oxime. So oxime will hold it will hold the phosphate group and it will remove it from the serine binding site. Okay, and it can free the enzyme from this organophosphate. See, somewhat like this is the structure. So what this oximes will be doing, this is the oxime, and it will take this phosphate group back. It will remove this phosphate group from the enzyme where it was bonded. So this is the structure, and this enzyme molecule will be back to its normal condition. Okay, so this is how the oximes such as peroximes can inhibit the aging. Okay, so this is how organophosphate such as your irreversible inhibitors will inhibit the enzyme. So what this phosphate organophosphate molecule will do, this phosphate molecule will interact with this serine molecule of the enzyme, and it will hold it. Okay, and it will hold it permanently. After sometimes this R2, this alkyl group, will be removed out, and because of which this enzyme will be inhibited permanently. So for producing the action, we want this serine group to be freed off. Okay, but if this thing is occupied by phosphate group, means this serine group will not be free. That means this enzyme will no longer be able to inhibit the acetylcholine molecule. Okay, so how can we save this enzyme? If we want to save this enzyme, we require an antidote, which is oximes. So what this oxime will do? This oxime will remove the phosphate group and free this enzyme. But there is a condition. Oximes can inhibit this organophosphate before aging occurs. Aging means removal of this alkyl group. Before alkyl group has been removed, at that time if we give this antidote, in that case only we can maintain the initial situation of the enzyme. Okay, so this is how oximes can produce the antidote action. Now we have been left with the very last topic, that is anticholinesterase poisoning. Anticholinesterase poisoning. See, till now we were attempting to protect our acetylcholine by inhibiting the enzyme cholinesterase, thinking that cholinesterase is a big villain and acetylcholine is our hero. So we need to protect our hero and we need to inhibit the villain, that is our enzyme cholinesterase. But when you are inhibiting too much of your villain, that is your enzyme cholinesterase, some cholinesterase poisoning occurs. You know why this poisoning occurs? Because of too much of your acetylcholine. When there is too much synthesis or too much of acetylcholine available inside our body, there will be large amount of adverse effect produced. Okay, because this acetylcholine, like hungry dogs, they will be in search of the receptor and they will activate the receptor, and so much of cholinergic activity will be produced. Actions such as your muscarinic actions like your salivation, lacrimation, sweating, pupil size will be reduced, meiosis will be occurring. Next, peristalsis will be increased, because of which abdominal cramp may occur. Your gastric acid secretion will be increased. In your lungs, your bronchoconstriction may occur, bronchial secretion will be increased, and your skeletal muscle will be too much depolarized, leading to paralysis. Even your ganglia will be stimulated, because of it sympathetic action will also be produced. So much of adverse effect or increased action of the cholinergic system will be produced. So that is known as anticholinesterase poisoning. Poisoning taking place because of inhibition of your enzyme cholinesterase. So what can we do for this poisoning? So we for in case of poisoning, we can give some muscarinic blockers such as atropine. So atropine is the very first drug that comes to the site. So atropine is highly effective in counteracting the muscarinic symptoms, but higher doses are required to antagonize the central effects. It does not reverse the peripheral muscular paralysis, because it is basically a nicotinic action, but it is able to inhibit almost of the muscarinic activity. It can block the muscarinic receptor and thereby inhibit the muscarinic activity. So atropine has been given nearly 2 mg IV repeatedly for every 10 minutes until and unless dryness of the mouth is been produced. See, as such the action of the acetylcholine was it increased the salivation. So we need to reverse that thing. So atropine is given. So unless and until dryness of the mouth is been occurred, the 2 mg of intravenous atropine is given continuously in a span of every 10 minutes. Okay. So continued treatment with the maintenance dose may be required for after 1 to 2 weeks. Okay, so this is about atropine. Another drug that can be used for treating the anticholinesterase poisoning is your cholinesterase reactivators. Cholinesterase reactivators, which are nothing but your friend oximes. A very simple example is your pralidoxime. Okay, so these agents will be acting only in that condition that before aging occurs, at that only at that particular time only they can be used as an antidote. Okay, so pralidoxime is injected intravenously slowly in a dose of 1 to 2 grams. It causes more marked reactivation of the skeletal muscle cholinesterase than at the autonomic side, and not at all in the central nervous system, because it cannot penetrate the blood brain barrier. So treatment should be started as early as possible, that is within 24 hours before aging occurs, because after aging these drugs will not be effective. So this was our last topic regarding the anticholinesterase poisoning. I hope you like this video. Thank you.